Good evening, everyone. So, let's start with the session for today. Welcome to Comprehending API and Github with Keploy. So, going forward with this session, I would like to introduce us as the speakers. So, hi, I'm Shantini Dev. I'm also the GDSC lead at my campus, a Beta Microsoft Learn Student Ambassador, and a Keploy Ninja. Over to you, Pratyaksh.
Hey everyone, this is Pratyaksh. I am from University of Engineering and Management. I am an open source contributor and currently a Windows app dev at an open source organization. Over to you, Shantanu.
So let's get started. Well, it's a workshop series. So today is day one, and we will be talking about all about APIs and GitHub basics, which will be which will be instructed by Pratyaksh, and I'll be talking about API 101. So going forward, let's talk about the benefits and eligibility criteria for all the gifts. So, if you are in for the benefits, then you have to hang in till the end of the session because at the end of the session, we are going to have a Kahoot quiz, and also based on the attendance criteria, we will be handing over to the participants all the benefits and LinkedIn Premium vouchers and everything in store. So, today's agenda. So we will be talking about API introduction, how it works, components of API, methods, status code, API security, API testing, and ending with GitHub and basics of GitHub. Well, what is API? Think of it as a messenger that will help you in interacting with different applications to exchange information. So talking about API, we would be almost curious that what is the full form of API? I mean, of course, it's not a short uh, version of API, right? So API stands for Application Programming Interface, and it's a set of rules and protocols that allow different software applications to communicate with each other. Heading over to an example to not bore you off. So think of it like you are in a restaurant. You are the customer, and the waiter is like the API. So the waiter takes your order and tells the cook what you want to eat. Then the cook prepares your food and gives it to the waiter, who is the API, and it brings back to you. So here, API is like the waiter in a restaurant who takes your request and communicates it to your application and then delivers the response like the waiter bringing your food back to you. For anyone still hovering over some doubts, you can scan over to the QR code and it will be redirecting you to a Medium blog written by me, and it will have all the descriptions about API and nitty gritty grits about anything you want to know about API. Now, heading over, let's talk about how an API works in real time. So basically, API acts as a middleman between websites and databases, like we are seeing in this flowchart diagram. It processes the requests and sends back responses to the website with the requested data. So this also allows the website to display the information you need to use. Now, you must be thinking like, wow, isn't it so much relevant with our some real life cases? Well, you can say API is like your wingman because it acts as a messenger between two different systems and it helps you to get information, just like a wingman helps you to get the attention of someone you're interested in. Well, enough of the jokes. Let's talk about some components of API. Okay, let me remind you that everything I'm teaching you right now is the whole thing that will be coming out in the quiz. So be alert if you want to score some amazing benefits. So just be attentive in the uh, discussion right now. So components of API, there are few components: methods, endpoint, parameter, status code, body. So here you can see method get is there. So what is method? Method is basically an HTTP method, a specific type of action that can be performed on an API endpoint. So common HTTP methods are get, post, put, and delete. For example, over here you can see it's get. So heading over to endpoint, it is a specific URL as you are seeing over here. It represents a specific function or resource in the API. These are used by clients to access specific functions or data in the API. Heading over to parameters, we can say that they are variables that are passed with the request to an API endpoint. For example, over here we are seeing there is send. So this can be included in the URL or in the body of the request. Next comes status code. As we are seeing 200 OK. Well, 200 is a very common status code. It goes for success. So if you are talking about what is a status code, well, it is a three-digit number that is included in the response from an API to indicate the success or failure of a request. Heading over to body, you can see it's a XML or plain text format. So it is a body of a request or response which contains the data being sent between the client and the API. Enough about components. Let's head over to methods. In one word, we can say get method is used to retrieve information from the server. Put method is used to update existing resources on the server. Well, for example, when you make a put request to an API, you're basically telling the API to replace an existing piece of data with new data. For example, if you have a broken toy and you want to replace it with a new one, you can make a put request to the toy store API, telling it to replace the broken toy. Similarly, there is patch, there is delete, there is post. We're talking about post method. It is used for creating a new resource. Delete is as simple as it sounds, used to delete existing resources from the server. Patch is used to partially update it. So there is nothing much you have to learn about it. Well, talking about status codes. Well, status codes are like a secret message that the computer sends back to the browser, the thing you use to look at websites. So they tell the browser whether everything went okay or if there was a problem. So over here we can see a few status codes, 1XX, which goes for informational, then success, then redirection, then client error, server error. Talking about few examples of 1XX, we can say 100, which goes for continue. This means that the server has received the request headers. 101, then there is 102 as well. Then talking about success status code, well, the most common, which is 200, it means the request was successful and the server returned the requested data. 201 means it is created. 202 means it is accepted. 203 means non-authoritative information, and there goes a lot. Then comes redirection 3xx. Well, there are similarly status codes like 301, which means moved permanently. 302 means found. And all the information about other status code you can easily find in the Medium blog that I have asked you to scan the QR code in previous slides. Well, heading over to API security. So let me break it down to you. When security comes into mind, in layman terms, it means that how we lock the doors to our house to keep strangers out. So similarly, API security is all about making sure that only the right people can access the data and services provided by the API. So there are many instances and cases where hackers try to um, get inside the database, which is not supposed to be handled by them. So to prevent this kind of actions, we use API security. So few of the methods by which we enable API security is HTTPS, password hash, API key in URL, OAuth, and timestamp. Um, if I want to divulge into them one by one, then HTTPS is basically to make sure that any data you send or receive through the API is encrypted, like putting your message in a secret code. Then comes password hash. So when we create a password, it's important to make sure it's strong and easy and not easy to break, right? Or else everyone can just put their name as their password or their date of birth, which I kind of think some people still do. But anyway, even if you have a strong password, sometimes hackers can still figure out. So that's why passwords are often stored as a hash, which is like a scrambled version of the password, which is very hard to unscramble. So this way, even a hacker, if they gets their hands on the password, won't be able to use it because they can't unscramble the password. Now, going over to API key in URL, it's like a secret password, you can say, that only the authorized users know. So it will help to verify the person using the API, so to see if it is allowed to use it or not, and it will keep out all the hackers. OAuth, also a very famous. It actually lets user access an API without giving away their password. Instead, the user logs in with using their own account with a different service like Google or Facebook, and that service vouches for them. And then lastly, timestamp. So a timestamp is like a little clock that records the time when something happened. In API security, timestamps can be used to make sure that requests are not too old and they are not replayed. So this help by preventing hackers from using old requests. Now, a lot of API security. Let's hover over to API testing. So we can say API testing is to test that the API is working correctly or not. There are specifically three procedures by which we make sure: validation, integration, security. It is like checking the secret code works correctly. So if you like, for example, you have a friend and you have a secret code to communicate, but sometimes the code doesn't work and you can't understand each other. So API testing basically helps us to make sure that the secret code is working properly so that the different application can understand each other and there is no breach of information. And also, if talked about real life scenarios, for example, if you're using an app that tells you the weather, such as like weather API, so API testing basically helps you making sure that the app gets the right information from the weather API, so that you know that the weather will be what will it will be like outside in real time. Just how you might ask your friend for information and make sure you understand what they say it correctly. Now, that's it from my side for now, but a very huge announcement. Keploy is basically participating in Google's Summer of Code as an organization this year. So, anybody who is interested to contribute or even start their journey in open source, well, this is the right session for you guys. On tomorrow's session, we will also discuss about Keploy and about all its nitty-gritty grades. For now, let's over to GitHub and its basics. Over to you, Pratyaksh.
Hey everyone, and thank you, Anthony. That was a really engaging talk. Now let me stream my window. Just a minute. Okay, is it visible to you guys?
It's
Yes.
visible.
Okay, cool. So today I'll be talking about Git and GitHub, primarily about GitHub itself. And because a lot of people in this talk, I believe, are people from first year, and Git is an essential tool that you will require throughout your career in software engineering. So it should be helpful. It should be really helpful if you know Git, and companies really prefer that when they see your resume. So if you know Git and if you are proficient in Git, that's a really huge plus point. So let's talk about why Git. I have tried to sell you Git, but why will I sell you Git? Well, here are a few reasons. So first of all, as I also said earlier, it will help better your portfolio, and then it will help better your code. I'll explain that how very soon. It will help you collaborate with other people on a similar on the same code base and collaborate and work on that code base simultaneously. And Git is essentially magic. It's actually literally a time machine, so it's really useful for you guys. Because how many times have you actually been writing a program and then suddenly through some iteration of the program you manage to basically code a bug, and then now you cannot really figure out which part has the bug, and you cannot go back to the previous iteration before the bug was introduced either. So Git aims to solve these kind of problems. That's why it's literally a time machine. And one more thing in the end is जो हम सबको चाहिए पैसा ही पैसा होगा. Anyway, so what's Git? Git is basically time machine for your code. Essentially, it allows you to save checkpoints of your code and then come back to them later, or see older versions of your code, and and it also helps you debug issues with your code. Git also allows you to collaborate with other people. Git allows you to host on platforms like GitHub. GitHub is basically a place where all those time machines, that is, all those code repositories, all those very large projects live. Because, see, the thing is, when you're really working on projects, when you're in some big companies like Meta or Facebook, I mean, Meta or Microsoft, and when you are working on big projects, you are not the only person who is working on those projects, right? There are more people who are working on the project. And if and you can like can you imagine the scenario if there was only one computer, if there was only one access point from where each developer, from where anyone could access the code, anyone in the company could access the code. So that would be pretty messed up. That would not at all be efficient. That is the reason, that is one of the reasons Git exists. And yeah, that's about it. So let's talk about open source. Open source is basically code that other people can see. So for example, if you develop a calculator app using JavaScript, right, and you can obviously see the web page of the app and all of that, you can use the web page, but what's really happening behind the scenes, nobody will know that unless and until they have access to the source code. So when we are talking about open source, it's also important to emphasize on closed source, the differences between open source and closed source. The most basic difference between open source and closed source is that open source is code that is freely available for anyone to see, for anyone to scrutinize and look at, and you can also, make your own changes in open source code. Whereas closed source is something that is proprietary and that is private. So you can think of closed source, that's closed source code, that's code which is basically owned by a company, and the product is used to drive significant amount of profits for the company. So the main motive behind keeping projects closed source is for companies to keep users and developers gatewalled in a way that no other person from outside the company can copy that source code and then make their own project. For example, the most popular example is Linux v Windows. Linux is open source. Linux kernel is open source, and most Linux-based operating systems that are built upon Linux kernel, those are open source. That is the reason you see so many Linux distros such as Ubuntu, Zorin, etc., etc. But when it comes to Windows, there are really very few options that you see, and there are no drastic changes except when there's major version changes, like between 10 and 11. Right. So the reason behind that is because people cannot see what builds Windows 11, what's the source code of Windows 11, but people can easily look into the source code of Linux kernel or a Linux based operating system, and then they can modify it to their own liking and then build another operating system on top. So that is the basic difference between closed source and open source. Next up, we have discussed about open source and closed source. So now we are heading into Git commands. Some few very basic Git commands that almost every beginner needs to be aware of in order to start their journey in the software engineering industry. Um, these are some of the Git commands that I have, that I think that you guys will find really useful. And attached right next to them are the icons that are relevant to those Git commands. So there's git clone. What git clone does is basically, say for example, somebody else is hosting an open source project of their own. Or let's just say, okay, forget that. Let's just say that somebody has a project of their own, right? And you have access to the source code of that project. Typically, you would have access to the source code using various providers of Git, such as GitLab, GitHub, etc. So let's say that you have access to the source code of a project, but you can only see the source code of the project through your browser. Now, say if you want to modify something in the source code, if you want to add a feature, or you want to fix a bug that you have found, or you have found a security issue that you want to fix. So in order to be able to do that, you need to modify the source code, right? And to modify the source code, you cannot, I mean, you can do that in your browser, but one other way, but the legacy way and the best way of doing that is to get the source code on your computer, on your local device, make your changes, commit your changes, and then push your changes to the cloud, which is basically where the GitHub repo is hosted, which is where the Git repo is hosted, my bad. So git clone is a command that we use to download projects, to download code from the internet, from cloud. The basic syntax is something like git space clone space the URL of the project. So say it can be something like git clone https github.com/pratyaksham/winrise. Then suppose then say you have cloned the project, you can now access the project on your local device without needing to use internet. So now you can just open the project in your favorite text editor of choice. I'd say VS Code. So you'll open the project. You'll do some changes in the files that you deem are necessary to perform changes in. Then once you have done those changes, next step that you need to do is make a checkpoint of those changes. So that's like a checkpoint in your time machine, in your time travel. So the time machine can travel to that checkpoint. ऐसा. So what you do to create a checkpoint is it requires two commands. First, you need to tell Git what files are you going to make a checkpoint of, because Git won't make a checkpoint of the entire project. Git will only make a checkpoint of the most recent changes or of the changes that you have performed, right? So typically what people do is the typical syntax is git space add space dot. The period here stands for all of the files in the project, but if you say if you want to commit only a single file in your project, then you can do something like git add and then name of the file. So once that's done, now Git knows what it needs to make a checkpoint of, like what's the content of the checkpoint, right? Next we do git commit. Git commit is basically, previously we used git add to tell Git that this is the file that I'm creating a checkpoint of. Next we'll do git commit to tell Git ki, okay, now you create a checkpoint. Commit is basically checkpoint. So next git commit is used to create a checkpoint. And then the basic syntax of git commit, don't worry, you don't need to remember any commands at all. You can easily find them either on the internet, or I'll also show you a hands-on, so that will be easy for you to see and get a hold of. But the basic syntax of git commit is git commit hyphen m space, in quotations you will write down your checkpoint message. You will describe the changes that you made and like why the checkpoint is relevant and all of that. After git commit, you have already created a checkpoint now. The next step is to push that checkpoint to the cloud so that other people can also see that, okay, this is the latest checkpoint that was created by, say, Pratyaksh. So for that, you use git push, the green color command. Git push, as simple as that. Then you also have these other miscellaneous commands, and two of them are also listed here, such as git status and git log, which I'll demo to you guys later on. Now we go into the hands-on part. We'll do something really simple. What we'll do is we'll create a new git repository. A git repository, remember, is basically just a very simple folder structure, right? So it can be like the root directory of any project that you're working on. So we'll just enter a Git repository, and then we'll enter a folder, and then we'll initialize Git in it. Then I'll demo you what we can do with Git. The most basic things that we can do on Git to get you started. So now I'm going to switch to my browser. Is my entire screen visible, by the way?
Yeah, it is.
Okay,
Your
cool.
PPT is visible till now.
Is my PPT still visible?
Yes.
Okay, hang on. It's weird. Hang on. Okay, my entire screen should be visible now.
Yeah, it's visible.
Okay, cool. So here I am in my terminal, right? I can use something like ls to create to list all the directories that I have, to list all the directories and files that I have in this folder. But I'm not going to use that. I'm going to use a command called mkdir. Mkdir basically stands for make directory. Directory is like a folder. Directory is a folder. So mkdir creates a new folder for you. So we say mkdir and then we tell it what's the name of the directory. So in this case, let's name it just something very dumb, that is test. So we have created test directory, and then we can change directory into test. So I said cd, which stands for change directory, and I'm going into the test directory. Now let's check the contents of this folder first to get a basic idea of what my source code looks like. As you can see, it's basically empty because this is a brand new project. I haven't created anything yet. But let's create something using Notepad, or let's just use code, VS Code. So this is a test file. It's called test.md. MD stands for Markdown, which is a formatting standard for documents. So here I'll write, hey friends, and this is how it looks like. This is the preview of test.md. So I'll minimize my window, then I'll list the files again here. And now you can see that I've created a file called test.md that was previously not visible to me. So now I need to tell Git. Now, first of all, I need to check what's the status of Git in this folder. For that, I can use this. It's called Git status. So it returned a fatal error. That is, this is not a Git repository. And the reason behind that is because not every folder in your computer is a Git folder. Not every folder is a Git repository. You need to manually use a command. You need to manually run a command, and then it will be a Git repository. The command is git init that I also showed in my presentation. That is the essentially the first step when creating a project or when migrating a project in Git. So I say git init. Init stands for initialize, and then I press enter. So now it says initialized Git repository at this location. And now if I do ls, I can see again the all of my files. But there's one very important thing that you guys need to note here, and you should keep this in mind until the end of time, or like as long as you are going to be in computer software industry, which is, if you see this folder in file explorer, you'll see this git folder, .git folder. This folder is essentially the whole dimension, or whatever you want to call, of the time machine. And if you remove, in any case, if you remove this folder, then you will lose your entire Git history, which is basically all of your checkpoints, everything you will lose. You will still have your project to play around with, but all of your history and the details and the latest commits and all of them will be gone. So make sure to not remove this folder. And the reason this is not visible in terminal is because I think it is hard coded in terminal to not expose the .git folder. And the reason it's showing in here is because I've enabled hidden items in File Explorer. Right. So next up, what we are going to do is, as you can see in Git status, it says untracked files. So untracked files means Git is simply saying कि there exists a file in this folder, but I'm not sure what it does. I'm not sure what's the, like, I'm not sure if I should take it or not. I'm not sure if I should commit it or not. I'm not sure about anything at all about this file. What we are going to do is we are going to tell Git to add this file into its basically the knowledge base, you can call it. So now, as you can see, the icon here changed from question mark 1 to +1. Previously it was not sure about the file, and now it knows ki, okay, yeah, this is the file that I need to take care of. So now if you see, this is called the staging area. Staging area is basically a stage, and this stage has test.md in it, right? So now I can simply, now Git knows about this file. Now Git knows what I'm going to create a checkpoint about. So I can simply give it something like git commit, then this hyphen m. You don't need to care about all of this stuff. That is just my command history. You can ignore that. You can focus only on this line, right? So this is git commit hyphen m, standing for test, and then you can say something like standing for message. I'm sorry, and then you can say something like commit one, or you can say initial commit. Now you can see it has created a new commit, and if you see in git status, it says nothing to commit, working tree is clean. It's basically saying that all of the changes are now merged into a checkpoint, and I don't know, like there's no file that I don't know about, right? So now what we need to do is this project already exists on my computer, but if I want to push it to the cloud for other people to see, so then I'll need to create a new GitHub repository, or you can create any other Git repository in a different Git provider, uh, like GitLab and all of them, right? So for creating a new GitHub repository, you'll need to go to your browser at github.com. I am at github.com. But when you will be at github.com, you will be greeted with something like this, provided you haven't already signed up to GitHub. So you will need to sign up from here. You'll need to go through the entire sign up process, which I'm going to be honest about. It's pretty simple. So I'm not going to show that to you guys. And once you have signed up, you'll come across something like this. So once you are in, you can press on new on the bottom left corner. Then I'm on the create new repo page. Here you can enter the name of the repo. So the name of the repo can be anything. For example, if this repo is part, if this repo is part of a very large software project, right? Then this repo can be named something like project name dash component name. But this standard is usually not followed. So instead, what you can do is you can basically just write the name of the project. In my case, I'll just write learning. This is basically the name of your folder, and it is not the same. Like it can be different from the folder that your local computer has. The names of the local folder and the cloud folder need not be the same. So I'm going to create this repo that's called learning. And here are a few more options, like I can tell people what this is about. So part of demo at a workshop, I can tell people this so that people can get more context about the repository. And then I can choose if this is open source or closed source, right? If you select public means anyone can see this piece of code. It's open source. Anyone can see, anyone can download this code, anyone can make their own changes into this code. But if you select private, that means that usually the project is proprietary and it's closed source, which means only you and people who you want can see the code in this folder and make changes to the code in this folder. Apart from that, here we also have a few more options that basically ask you how to initialize the repo. But I'm just going to ignore all of that for now. You can obviously learn more when you are creating your own repo. These are pretty simple options, such as adding a README file, which is basically the documentation of the project, adding period git ignore, which is a file that we create to tell git to ignore certain sorts of files. And then we can choose ultimately a license for our project. I'll choose the most simple license for my project, which is the unlicense. And then we can just simply create the repo. So now you can see the repo is created, right? Now what we can do is we can copy the URL of this repo. This is the URL of this repo. We can come to our terminal and then we can say git remote add origin, then paste the URL of the repo. What this does is it tells git that, okay, here's a URL that you need to remember for this particular folder. Here's a URL that you need to keep in your index for further references, future references as well. So this is the part where I tell Git ki, okay, this is a location, add it to your index. It's simply adding the URL to its index, adding the location of the repo in the cloud to its index, but it's not doing any changes to any files at all. Now, once I've said ki, okay, add this to your index, the next thing that we are going to do is git remote set URL origin, then copy the URL again. What this does is it tells Git ki for this particular folder that is a Git repo, this URL that I copied, this is the one that points to the cloud. This is the cloud URL for this current repo. So I can just press enter. And if it doesn't spit out anything at all, it means the command worked just fine. But if it shows an error, it usually means that you need to fix something. So once that done, now Git already knows ki what's the cloud version of this repo that it needs to reference, that it needs to send files to. So basically like an address for Git to, like a location for Git to know to send its project updates to. Once that's done, what we can do is, since we created a file called license in this project, license exists here, but you can see that license doesn't exist here. Right. This is where git pull comes into play. What git pull does is it downloads the latest changes of the code into your current folder from the cloud. So I'm going to use git pull. Okay, hang on. So here's an error. As you can see, I'm supposed to basically run git branch u origin master origin git pull master. No. Okay, I'll need to check what this error is. Git pull git branch set um upstream to origin master. If no. Okay, let's restart this process. I think something is messed up here, and I'm not sure what that is because I haven't faced this error before ever. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another new project that's called test2 very app. Then I'm going to access the folder, and just like before, I'm going to initialize Git, and then here on GitHub, I'm going to create a new repo. And then I'll name this repo something like funding 2. And then I can just select if it's closed source or open source. and I'll just tap on create repo to create the repo. Now, once that's done, if you don't select uh, any license, then you will be greeted with something like this. This essentially means that the folder that's created in the cloud is fully empty. It doesn't have any files at all. So now GitHub is suggesting you to run these commands, basically copy paste these commands and then create and then get started with your repo. But I'll strongly suggest against practices like this, because essentially what this does is it doesn't make you curious at all. It doesn't really lead to question you why you are copying these commands, what do these commands do. So what I would suggest is, instead of doing this, you just again, just like previously, you'll copy this, you'll come here, you'll again use git remote add origin, right? And then you will use git remote set URL origin. And one important thing that you guys need to take care about, which I just realized, the error I was facing previously is related to this thing. Let me show you. Hang on. CD learning. So this is my, is this my old repo? No, this is my old repo. The issue that I was facing is that this branch is essentially a timeline where your time machine travels, and a git repo can have a lot of timelines at the same time, right? So I am on the timeline called master, but in GitHub here, when we created the folder, when we created the repository, the timeline is called main. So there was this pull conflict there where it wasn't able to pull the changes from GitHub, because even though it knew what location to pull from, it didn't exactly knew what timeline to pull. So that is the reason we face this issue. Again, to reiterate, you can see the branch is named main here, and in my older repo, the branch is called master. So that is the reason we were facing that issue. But okay, let's go back to our new folder, clean all of this for you to understand better. So now we are here. What we can do is, since here they have created a main folder, main branch, you can see they are providing a command called git branch -m main. This means that the default branch that they have created is the main branch or the main timeline. And again, here you can see, even in my new project, the default branch that's created is the master branch. So in order to create a new branch, you can use a command like git checkout b main. Okay, this creates a new timeline from your current state of code. So when I hit this, it switched to a new branch called main. And as you can see, it updated from master to main. So now I can again open VS Code here and can create a file called readme.md. This is a test file. As you can see, this is the preview of my file. So I'll save this file via the editor, and then I'll go back to my terminal. From here, if I press enter, you can see I just pressed enter. I did nothing. I didn't use a command. I just pressed enter. Now from the green colored main, it switched to something like a yellow colored main. This won't come with you by default, but this is because I've just themed my terminal that way. So this is visually indicating to you, without even running any commands at all, that there is some change that Git isn't aware about that requires the users or the developers attention. So let's see what that change is. Okay, so the change is, there's a new file that's called readme.md, as we just created, and that file is untracked. So Git doesn't know what to do about that file, what to do for that file. Now we are going to tell Git ki, okay, do one thing, import all the files, right? Import all the files. So in order to import all the files, in order to tell it ki track all the files, we are going to use the period key. So you can also see that I previously used period here. That was to indicate that open VS Code from the current folder. Anyway, so I used git add period, and now I pressed enter. So from like a question mark, it went to check mark +1. Now Git knows ki okay, there's a file, and I know that this file is going to be committed. This file is going to be used to create a checkpoint. Again, like we did earlier, this is our checkpoint. Git commit -m initial commit, or we can just name this anything like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever you want. So once we type this, we can press enter, and as you can see, in the main branch, it created a root commit that's called initial commit. The root commit is basically the first commit of your project, and this is the change of the this is what the commit changed. It added a new file, create mode readme.md, and ignore those set of numbers. These are basically permissions that are displayed in decimals. You can ignore them. And here it's also summarizing key, okay, this is the changes of the commit. It basically, there's one file changed where there's one insertion, right? So now we can simply use git push to push this code into our cloud GitHub repo. As you can see, we are facing this issue here. Let's see what this issue is. So the current branch main has no upstream branch. Push the current branch and set remote as upstream. Use this command, right? So what I'm going to do is use that command. I have to specify initially when I'm creating a project or when I'm migrating a project into GitHub, I'll need to specify even during pushing, even during the first push, what branch essentially am I committing to? Otherwise, Git won't know. It needs to be specified every single thing. So as you can see in this page, if we update this page, here is a initial commit. I pushed it just 1 minute ago, and this is a test file, as you can see here. From here, we can do more changes, such as we can, again, okay, I think VS Code already has this file open. Yeah, this is another test. Now, if I press enter, you can see, okay, yeah, there's one more file that it needs to take care of. That file has there is one file that it needs to take care of. This file has some sort of change. It doesn't know what change, but it is aware about the file. So if I do git status, okay, so modified. A new file was, the previous file was modified. Previously, it was showing question mark, and currently it's not showing question mark. Right, it's showing something that looks like a mustache or something. Anyway, so we can again create a new commit, like this is my second commit. I added a new line of code. This basically summarizes my changes in English. So I say that I'm sorry. So as you can see, these are mistakes that can happen. I didn't add this file to the staging area. So you need to tell Git ki, okay, I did modify this file. Now please create a file. Now please create a checkpoint with this specific file. So you need to specify that, okay, please add readme.md into your staging area. Now it knows ki, okay, I'll make a checkpoint on this file only. As I specified here, git add readme.md. So on this file only. Now I can use git commit -m, and then this is my argument, which is the commit message. Then once I do this, you can see previously when we created our very first commit, you saw I ran this git commit initial commit. It said main root commit and then an ID of the commit. Now it's no longer saying main root commit because this is the second commit. This is not the very first commit of my project, right? And again, it's summarizing list of like the changes that I performed in this checkpoint. So once I'm done reviewing those changes, I can simply use git push. And when I do git push, this time it won't throw any changes like the previous time it did, because this time, since I already mentioned previously that I need to push to main branch. This time now it knows, now it remembers ki, okay, I'll need to push to main branch, so let me just push to it without asking the user again. So here you go, this is my second commit, and this is a test file, this is another test. Okay, now let me introduce you to another scenario. You and your teammate are working on the same piece of code at the same time, right? So what you guys are doing is you guys can create two separate timelines. Timeline, as I said earlier, it's essentially a branch. So to create a new timeline, you need to use git checkout -b stands for branch. Then you say, just mention the name of your timeline. So it will be timeline 2. And once you mention the name of your timeline, you can just go ahead and press enter. And as you can see, it has switched to a new branch, and it's also updated in my theme. So now it's in the new branch. Okay, now let's see. Now let's pretend like I am the second person in the team who is also simultaneously working on the same code. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to this folder in my GitHub in my VS Code. I'll create another file called pratyaksh.txt. This is my contribution to my very awesome source code. I typed this, right? And now, oh, and one more thing. In a VS Code, you can also see that this tab, the tab that's currently opened, it shows U right next to the file name. U means, as you can see in the tooltip, it's showing untracked. That means, okay, this new file is created, but Git doesn't know about this file. So if I press enter here, again you can see question mark 1. Like, what do I do about this file? This was just created. So again we need to tell Git that, okay, do one thing, add this file. So here's pratyaksh.txt. Okay, now Git knows about my file. Again, what we can do is we can commit this file, right? And when I push, here you are going to face another error that I'm going to show you. Now when I push, again I am faced with the same error that I faced when I was pushing my initial main branch, which is now again I need to tell it ki, okay, push this specific branch. So I can use something like timeline 2. So this is the entire command. You can also use this and this command that they have listed here, or you can use this. This is essentially a short command for the same thing. Okay, now it knows key. Now I need to push to the timeline 2 branch, and as soon as I go to my web page, you can see timeline 2 had recent pushes less than 1 minute ago. Here I'm not seeing the commit that I just created. What's my latest commit called? It's called test. I cannot see something called test here. There is no commit called test here. The reason behind that is because you need to switch your timelines. This is the place where you switch your timelines, switch your branches. From here, I need to tap on timeline 2. Or once I tap on timeline 2, then I'm presented with the latest changes from timeline 2. Right, and again I can tap on main branch and all of that. So you need to be very aware of what you are doing when you are using Git commands. You need to be very specific about them. Okay, I'm done here. So now let me just clear up this canvas. And now that I'm done with the hands-on, is there anything else that you guys need to know about Git? Let me think about it. Give me a moment. Okay, let me also teach you guys about pull requests. That is a very important thing in open sourcing. Open sourcing is basically, as I told you earlier, dealing with other people's already publicly available code and committing to them and contributing to them. So here you can see a tab called pull request, but I'm not going to touch that tab for now because if you open that tab, there's no pull request in here. Now I need to first of all explain you what a pull request essentially is before I really give you a hands-on on that. Pull request is when you see someone else's code base, they are not your friend, they are some unknown person, or maybe they are your friend, it doesn't really matter. But you see someone else's code base, and you see that you could either give it some improvement, you could make some improvement in that source code, or you can fix a bug that's reported in that source code so that the project does not have that bug anymore. So what you could do is you could obviously use the commands that I told you earlier, which is git clone, and then once that repo is downloaded to your folder, then you would open the relevant files, fix the issue or add the feature that you wanted to add, and then you had to push that folder to your own GitHub repo. Because obviously when some code is open source, you cannot modify that code directly. You can modify a copy of that code that you have with yourself, a copy of that code that is associated with your own account, but you cannot modify their source code, right? So what you would do is basically, let me demo it to you right now. So this is my friend Shantoni who just spoke to you guys, and in here we are going to search for a repo that's called GitHub Workshop. So let's pretend that this is a source code that I want to contribute my own changes in. So I've noticed something here that could use either some improvements and all of that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap on this green button. Then I'm going to simply, in this text field, you can see here's a URL. You can copy that URL, or you can also copy from your URL tab, like from your address bar. So once you copy this URL, what you can do is you can come back. You can use git clone, because now what I'm doing is this is somebody else's code that I am getting on my own device for me to make changes on, right? So, okay, no, the first thing that we'll do is we'll create a copy of that file in our own Git provider's account. So in my own GitHub account, I'll first create a copy of her code so that I can finally commit to that code. So I'm just going to press on fork here, and then it's asking me, it's giving me a prompt where I can change the repo name and modify the description or add a description, whatever, whatnot. I'm just going to leave it as it is and create a fork here. And as you can see, this process was pretty quick. But when you're working really large projects that have like gigabytes of source code in them, those kind of scenarios, when you're forking them, then those forks will be very slow. It will take like a few minutes for those forks, not like a few minutes, but like 30 to 40 seconds for those forks to take place. Anyway, so now that I've created my fork, you can see on the top left part of my screen, it says Pratyaksham slash GitHub Workshop, copied from or forked from Shantani Dev slash GitHub Workshop. Right. So it's also pointing to the master, it's pointing to the parent repo of this forked repo or this child repo, you can say. So now I'm going to copy the URL or copy this Git repo location, and then I'll come here, I'll just clone it like this. So again, I used git clone, and then I just copied the link, and then I pressed enter. So as you can see, it cloned into a folder called GitHub Workshop. And if I list all the directories here, you can see a folder called GitHub Workshop is made. So I can open that folder using CD. Once I'm in, I can see, okay, so this is the file that Shantoni has created. So this is you can pretend the entire source code of the project that I'm going to work on, right? And once again, I can pass it the code period argument to open VS code in this current folder. And I can add my own changes in this file. So I'll just say, hey, this is Pratyaksh, right? Now it says M for modified. So Git already knows about this file. Now Git is just saying, okay, this file, I already know about it, but you made some changes to it. So now you need to tell me if I should take this file into account when I'm creating a new checkpoint in my timeline. So now if I do git status, yeah, there's this file called readme that's been modified, right? So I can also create a new file. This new file is called MLSA.txt. I don't know, I'm out of names right now, and I can just write test here. So you can see one very different thing here, which is here it says U, here it says M. There must be a reason behind that, because what I did is I essentially made changes. That's all I did. But no, you need to be aware of what you are doing. If you remember clearly, I created this new file right now. So if I created this new file, obviously Git doesn't know about it. Git only knows about the files that were created earlier. So now I need to tell Git that, okay, Git, do one thing. First of all, show me what's your status. Okay, so okay, so this is the status. One file was modified, and there's this new untracked file. Untracked file is basically, this file was just created, bro. I don't know anything about it. Modified is basically, okay, this file was created earlier, so I know about it. So I can just simply go git add all stand like period stands for all, like the entire content of this folder. Once I do this, it will add everything into its staging area. So now again, if I go git status, okay, now it's clearly showing me. So okay, there's this new file boss. It's called mlsa.txt, and then there's this another file that's been modified, but it isn't a new file. It's just modified. Okay. Now what I need to do is I need to create a checkpoint. At this point, Git knows these are the files I need to create a checkpoint of. Now I need to create a checkpoint. But before that, let me demonstrate to you another scenario that you may find useful when you're developing your own projects and using Git. That is, if you accidentally use this git add all command, what it did is it added all the files into the staging area. But you are like, oh, okay, no, there's this one file that I don't need to add. I don't need to publish it. That's my own file. They don't need to see it. What you need to do is you need to do something like git reset and then mlsa.txt. Once that done, git forgets about the file. So again, it's untracked. Okay, at this point, I can just go ahead, add every file as I did before, and then I can create a new commit. That's the commit name, and I can just do that. Now I just push it. Obviously, during pushing, you saw that there were no conflicts, there were no problems. That is because this repo was created and pushed into before, so that's completely fine. Now we go back to our browser, and when we refresh this, we will see that okay, I created a new commit that's called Pratyaksh, and if I open the Pratyaksh commit, I can see the changes that I created here. Right. Now I can go to into pull requests, which is now the main part. Now I'm going to ask Anthony that I ask Anthony, these are the changes I made. If you find them good, then please merge them into your master, into your parent code. So as you can see, it's going to compare the changes between the parent repo and the child repo. And then you can just go ahead. Since there are no problems here, you can just tap on create pull request. Once that's done, you should summarize here what this pull request is for. So I'm just going to added very useful info. Then I can just tap on create pull request. Now I didn't add in the description at all. But if Shantanu can see this in her browser right now, Shantanu, are you seeing this in your browser?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
so can you
seeing.
please go ahead and if you find the PR useful, can you merge it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thanks, Anthony.
I merged the pull request. Are you able to see it?
Yeah, so as you can see, Shantanu has merged the pull request into her own timeline. So now if I go to Shantanu's code, I can see, okay, there's this file called mlsa.txt. That was just pushed from my side, and my pull request is marked with with a flag that's called merged because it's been merged. So yeah, that's all from my side, Shantani. If you want, you can take over, or if people want, they can ask any questions that they have at this point in time.
Yeah, you can switch on your mic and ask questions. Or else we'll head over to the Kahoot quiz.
Okay, yeah. So we'll do the Kahoot quiz first, and then I'll show them the QR code. Am I right?
Yeah, that would be perfect.
Okay, cool. Then I'm ending the screen share from my side.
Okay, sure.
Okay.
Uh, is my screen visible?
Yeah, yeah.
All right. So for beginners or anybody out here right now, wait 1 second. So there will be pin which will be generated. You have to join the Kahoot quiz after going to www.kahoot.it. So yeah, as you'll be joining it, you will be getting a pin that you have to enter and share. So you can copy, get the pin from here since the chat is disabled due to some reasons. So yeah, so your name will be popped up like this. And also a huge encouragement. The first three winners will be getting LinkedIn Premium and also MLSA certificates as well as an MLSA nomination. And for the other attendees, they will be eligible for MLSA certificates as of now. Come on, guys, join the quiz. It's pretty easy. So, yeah. Pratyaksh, can you tell me the number of people in the meet right now?
Yeah. Excluding me and you, there are 13 people.
Okay,
So
cool,
I'm
cool.
not so sure about the. I'm not so sure about others. Those who are having trouble joining, let me just repeat it for you. You can go to your browser. You can type kahoot.it in the address field, and once the website opens, you can use the game pin that's shown in Shantani's screen to enter the game. Let us know if you have any problems, guys. You are always free to enable your mics and talk.
Hi everyone.
Hey,
Yeah.
man.
Hi, Aryan.
Am I audible?
Yeah.
So it's Aranik this side. So what is the benefit for getting that after getting the MLSA nomination and the certificate?
Well, MLSA nomination code will kind of fast track your interview process for becoming a Microsoft Learn Student Ambassador. So, as you know, MLSA takes in people in cohorts. Like after each quarter, there is a interview process, and people get in to MLSA. So there are a lot of benefits about MLSA. We can discuss it about in a different session. But if you are already aware of MLSA, you can use the nomination code which will be provided to you, and your your thing will be fast tracked. Your interview will be fast tracked, and you will get into MLSA. Yeah.
Okay, okay, that's great. That's great.
And obviously, there will be very, uh, it will be a useful addition into your resume.
Yeah, of course, of course. So will that will I get any benefit for the Microsoft Step internship, summer internship or something?
No, MLSA and STEP internship is totally different.
Yeah.
MLSA is basically for, it's a student ambassador program. It's a community based program. You can benefit if you network among the professionals because it's a community which is led by actual Microsoft professionals. So you can network among all the professionals of Microsoft and get insights about step internship and stuff.
Okay, so I get a benefit anyways, right?
It's about how you use it. Yeah.
Got it, got it.
Okay, Shantani, 11 people are in already. I think you can just go ahead and start the quiz. Or let's just ask once, is anyone left to join the quiz? If so, then you can turn on your mic and speak. Okay, I think Shantani, you can just start the quiz. And by the way, you are muted.
Yeah, sorry, there was someone at my door. Yeah, I guess I'll start. But I highly encourage you guys to join in using your own name. Uh, I don't know how I will be able to decrypt decipher or decipher on Paru if you guys win by any chance.
I I assume Paru is Shaq Parvez in the meeting.
Yeah, it's
Decipher
kind of
is me, it's Aranyak here.
Yeah, please
yeah,
leave the game and join with your actual name. It will
yeah,
be
or
easier for
else it
us
would be
to figure
very
out.
hard to track you down. Yeah. I think everybody is in. Should we start the quiz?
Let me check. Okay, so there are 11 people in the meeting. Um, yeah, I think you can start the quiz.
All right then. Yeah, so the questions might not appear in your screen, but will be appearing in colorful options. So yeah, just keep a full form of API. Keep a look at my screen and your screen simultaneously. Can you read out loud the answers? I mean, not answers, I mean options, Pratyaksh.
Yeah, sure. So what are the full form of API? What's the full form of API? The options are App Programming Interface, App Prodigy Interface,
Okay,
App.
done.
Okay, this
Time
one
is
is
up.
done.
Okay, so 7 people were able to guess right. That's amazing. Over to next question. Okay, the scoreboard. Jay Chauhan is at the first place. That's amazing. Well, yeah, Pratyaksh, go ahead.
Okay, so what is get method used for? Creating data, getting styling, getting status code, or retrieving data? The options are creating data, get styling, get status code, retrieve data. Nice.
6 people were able to answer it right. Let's look over to the scoreboard. Oh, Aryanyak is at the first position now. That's great. Okay, heading over to the third question.
Status code 102 stands for switching, continue, processing, or gateway timeout. I'm going to repeat. Status code 102 stands for switching, continue, processing, and gateway timeout.
Oh, okay, only one person was able to answer it right. Uh, Harmit is at the first position. Well, heading over to the next question.
OAuth is used for API testing. It's an API component. It's used in sign in with Google, or is it used in sign in without creating an account?
3 people were able to answer it correct. Heading over to the scoreboard, Harmit is at top again. Okay, next question.
REST API transports data in JSON. The options are true and false, obviously. So does REST API transport data in JSON?
Basically, it does REST API transport data in JSON format. So yeah, that's amazing. 9 people were attentive during the session and got it correct. So the scoreboard now is Harmit at first position, Arinyak is second, and Harsh at third position. Cool. Now, sixth question.
How to initialize a Git repository? The commands are, the command options are git init, git clone, git commit, and git push.
Yes,
Damn.
8 people were able to answer correct. Few people even answered git push. I mean, great. Uh, all right. So we use git init for initializing git repository as Pratyaksh taught us in the session. So heading over to the next question. Before that, the scoreboard right now remains the same. Well,
Harmeet was very attentive. Really
yeah.
nice. GitHub is owned by which company? GitHub Inc., Apple, Meta, or Microsoft?
Cool. I see a lot of Microsoft lovers, and yeah, it is right. Microsoft owns GitHub, and yeah, few
Let's
people
see the
even
scoreboard.
yeah. Oh, wow.
Nice.
So Harsh is right now in the first position. Pulkit is in second position, and Sheikh Parvez is in third position. That's amazing.
What does open source mean? Open book coding, coding and talking about it in Twitter, coding after watching YouTube videos, collaborating with others.
That's right. 8 people got it right. Now heading over to the scoreboard, Pulkit is in the first position.
Pulkit made a comeback.
Oh, great. Now heading over to the next question.
Are Git and GitHub similar? True or false? Are Git and GitHub similar? Nice.
That's amazing. Everyone was like, mostly everyone was attentive. So, yeah, heading over to the scoreboard, it remains the same. Now, to the last question of today's session.
How do you clone a remote repo in Git? Git restore, Git add, Git push, or Git clone?
Amazing. Everybody got it right. Looks like they were very attentive during the Git session. So, heading over to the final scoreboard. Harsh is in third position. Congratulations. Okay.
Damn. Congrats to all three of you for winning. And don't be
So,
disheartened, the rest of you. You will be getting the MLSA certificates too. Don't
yeah.
worry.
So Pulkit is in first position. Second position is Sheikh Parvez. Third is Harsh Navdare. You guys are eligible for MLSA nomination code as well as LinkedIn premium vouchers and MLSA certificates. And for everybody else who attended the event, they are also eligible for MLSA certificates. So yeah,
Oh,
now whoever got
Shantone. They sorry to interrupt. They also got like the winners also got access to Xbox Premium, Xbox, I guess,
no, it's like
Game
either
Pass.
LinkedIn premium voucher or Xbox.
Yeah, so either LinkedIn or Xbox Game Pass. Yeah, correct.
So now I guess Pratyaksh will be sharing a QR code. You have to
Yeah.
scan over to give your attendance for this event.
Hang on, give me a moment. Share window. So first of all, thank you to everyone for attending this workshop and making it a success. Thanks as well to Shantoni for such a great talk. And thanks to everyone else for being attentive throughout the session. Next up, we have the QR code. Every single one of you is supposed to scan this QR code and then fill up the form so that we can send you the MLSA certificates, and to the first three, to the winners, we can send the gifts. So now you guys can go ahead and scan the QR code.
Also, guys, while you are scanning the QR code, don't forget to attend tomorrow's session as well. It's a series, workshop series. So we will also be discussing about Keploy and how it is participating in GSOC this year. And we will also have a quiz tomorrow, and you can again win a chance to win MLSA nomination code and the other benefits, those who are disheartened for today. So yeah, just be ready for tomorrow's event as well.
Yeah, it's like a great opportunity for people who couldn't win today. Come back again tomorrow. Try to win tomorrow. You'll get either Xbox Game Pass or LinkedIn Premium per your choice. Are you done? Are you guys done scanning the code?
I can see 8 responses till now, and there are 15 people in the meet right now. So
So like
let's wait.
13 people are supposed to respond.
Okay, yeah, 13 people will be responding. So there is still now only 8 responses.
So those of you who have already responded, Shantani, shall we let them like leave the meeting? Shantani?
Yeah, sorry. So yeah, if you have responded, you are allowed to leave the meeting for now. It was amazing having all of you, and thank you for your time. Yeah,
Yeah, and we sincerely hope that you liked today's workshop. And we sincerely hope that you'll also tune in again tomorrow. Tomorrow, Shantani and someone else, I think, will be speaking as well. They'll be going into depths of API. So it will be really useful if you guys join tomorrow. Will be fruitful for you ultimately. So yeah, with that, people who have already scanned the code and filled up the form, you are free to leave the meeting. Shantani, I've asked them to leave the meeting. And people who still haven't filled up the form, please stay in the meeting. Let us know if you are facing any issues scanning the QR code. You can enable your mics.